Okay, so last video for today. I guess I'm going to have to start doing short videos every day, and that's fine with me. I just want you to keep up with which ones you have and which ones you hadn't. I'll get better at naming them, so then you'll know this one's reading, science, social studies, but I'm just in a hurry today. I've done these videos so long. This is the only thing I've done today other than eat lunch. But um, so Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. You probably heard it on the science one. I want you to read that book, okay? I'm actually going to read it at night, and y'all, it's been a day. Let's look at my hair. I'm going to actually read this one at night, and I'm going to get on here, and we're going to discuss it. And I'm probably going to put questions in your Google Classroom or on I can email them out to you if I want to. But and we'll figure out something. But I still want you to read Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. But I'm going to start Brian's Hunt with you. It's the last book. And y'all, the chapters are short and I can get it in under my time frame. Okay? So I'm starting Brian's Hunt with you today. Okay? Let me put it up here since some of y'all like to follow along. I've moved it so maybe it'll be closer. I don't know what I'm doing, y'all. Trying to get through this too. Okay. Chapter 1. I know some of y'all like to read along with me, so. All right. He was in his world again. He was back. It was high summer coming to fall, and Brian was back in the far reaches of the wilderness, or as he thought of it now, home. He had his canoe and bow, and this time he added some dried food, beans and rice and sugar. He also had a small container of tea, which he'd come to enjoy. He had a small cook set and a can to make little fires in the middle of the canoe. He put leaves on it to make smoke to drive the flies and gnats and mosquitoes away. He had some salt and pepper and almost a treat, matches. He still could not get over how wonderful it was just to be able to make a fire whenever he wanted one. And he never sat down to a cook fire without smiling and remembering when his life in the wilderness had begun. His first time alone. He dreamt of it often, and at first his dreams sometimes had the qualities of nightmares. He dreamt he was sitting there in a small plane, the only passenger, with the pilot dying and the plane crashing into the lake below. He awakened sometimes with sudden fear, his breathing coming fast. The crash itself had been so wild and he had been so out of control that the more he had grown in the years since, the more he had learned and handled difficult situations, the more insane the crash seemed. A wild, careening, ripping ride down through trees to end not in peace, but in the water, nearly drowning. And in the nightmares, it was like dying, and then not dying to die again. But the bad dreams were rarer all the time, and when he had them at all now, they were in the nature of fond memories of his first months alone in the bush, or even full-blown humor, the skunk that had moved in with him and kept the bear away, how Brian had eaten too many gut berries, which he'd later found out were called choke cherries, a great name, he thought, a chickadee that had once landed on his knee to take food from his hand. He had been young then, more than 2 years ago. He was still young, by most standards, just 16, but he was more seasoned now, and back then he acted young. No, that wasn't quite it either. New. He had been new then, and now he was perhaps not so new. He paused in the thinking and let the outside world come into his open mind. East edge of a small lake, midday. There would be small fish in the reeds and lily pads, sunfish and bluegills, good eating fish, and he'd have to catch some for his one hot meal a day. Sun high overhead, warm on his back, but not too hot the way it had been earlier in the week. No, hot but not muggy. The summer was dying out, getting ready for fall. Loon cry off to the left, not distress. Not a baby lost to pike or muskie. The babies would be big enough now to evade danger on their own, almost ready to fly, and would not have to ride on their mothers' backs for safety as they did when they were first hatched out. He was close in on the lily pads, and something moved suddenly in the brush just up the bank, rustling through the thick green foliage. And though it sounded big and made a lot of noise, he knew it was probably a squirrel or even a mouse. They made an inordinate amount of noise as they traveled through the leaves and humus on the ground. And there was no heavy footfall feeling as there would have been with a moose or deer or bear, although bear usually were relatively quiet when they moved. High-pitched squee of a hawk or eagle hunting and the calling to his or her mate. He couldn't always tell yet between the cry of a hawk and an eagle. The yip of a coyote, not wolf, because it was not deep enough, and not a call, not a howl or a song, but more of a yip of irritation. He had heard the yip before when he had watched a coyote hunting mice by a huge old pine log. The log had holes beneath it from one side to the other, and the mice could dance back and forth beneath the log through the holes, while the coyote had to run around the end and jump over the top, and the mice simply scurried back and forth under it to avoid him. The coyote tried everything, hiding, wading, digging a hole big enough for himself under the log so he could move back and forth, but nothing worked. After over an hour of trying to get the mice, he finally stood on top of the log, looking down one side, then the other, raised his head and looked right at Brian, as if he had known Brian was there the whole time, and gave an irritated, downright angry yip. It was, Brian felt, a kind of swearing. Up ahead, 400 yards, a moose was feeding in the lily pads, putting its head underwater to pull up the succulent roots, and Brian knew it would be an easy kill if he wanted it. Canoes seemed such a part of nature to the animals in the wild. Perhaps they thought canoes were logs, and if a person kept very still, it was often possible to glide right up next to an animal near the water. In many states, it was illegal to hunt from a canoe for just that reason. Brian had once canoed up to and touched a fawn standing in the shallows. With the feeding moose, it was simpler yet. All he had to do was scoot forward when the moose had its head underwater and coast when its head was up, looking around. Brian had plenty of arrows, 12 field points with 60 extra points and 100 extra shafts and equipment to make more arrows, and 24 broadhead arrows, as well as 50 extra broadhead points with triple blade heads the military had designed for covert work many years before. They were called MA3s, deadly, and if sharpened frequently, they were strong enough to reuse many times if he didn't hit a bone or miss and catch a rock. Looking at the moose, he salivated, thinking of that red meat and how it would taste roasted over a fire. But then he decided against it. The moose was a small bull, probably only 600 or 700 pounds, and nowhere near the 1,400 or 1,500 pounds the large bull would weigh. But even so, it was a lot of meat to deal with, and he couldn't bring himself to waste anything he killed. He had gone hungry so long. When he first come to the bush, food had been everything, and the thought of wasting any of it went against every instinct in his body. Even if he made a smoke fire and dried most of it in strips, he would still lose some meat. Still, he could see the shot, close to the moose. Close in, but yet far away to avoid the attack, the bow already strung. Wait until it ducked underwater to draw the bow, and then soon, as the head came out, release the MA3 just in the back of the shoulder blade, and the broad head would go straight into the heart. He shook his head. Rehearsals were all right. He did them all the time, came up with imaginary scenarios, and how they would play out even if he didn't act. Like the Kagwadash. He thought of her often. She was the daughter of the Cree trapping family he had found the first winter in the bush. He had met up with them at the end of the winter and went to live with them for 3 weeks until spring arrived with it and a plane to take him back to civilization. Kagwagash's white name was Susan Smallhorn, but he seemed to be thinking of her more and more by her Cree name. He thought of her constantly. She was his age, came up to her shoulder a little more, had smiling almond-shaped brown eyes, a mouth full, and straight nose and long, thick, richly black hair, and he had never met her. Her father, David Smallhorn, had shown him her picture, and David had missed her because she was away at school. The Attempter. That's what the Cree name meant, and her family had given it to her because she was very little when she was afraid of nothing, would try anything, which had given her a small scar on her left cheek when she was 4 years old, and tried to fire a high-powered rifle. As Brian sat in his canoe, he thought of it almost like a beauty mark women used to wear on their cheeks. Beauty mark. Strange to think of it that way. Strange to think in that flow. Scar from rifle to a beauty mark. True, she was pretty, and that was nice, but he did not really know her. But he thought how she might laugh when he met her and told her how his thoughts were running. The Smallhorn summer camp was north 4 or 5 lakes and some river travel from where he sat, perhaps 30 miles. He wasn't sure which lake they were on, but David had told him it was the lake with the shape of an arrowhead with a large island at the north end. The island almost touched the land and they stayed on the island because there were fewer mosquitoes out on the lake where the breeze could get to the camp. It was their permanent summer camp while they waited to move up their trapping area in the fall. He was heading towards the camp anyway, working north to see new country. Here all the rivers that ran from the lake and lake flowed north and west until they poured into a giant lake Winnipeg. And from there the rivers moved north and east to run into the Hudson Bay, way up above the timberline. He had in mind to go see the country, just head north. South was cities, people, and he was fast coming to think that people and what people did with their lives, with their world, was not good, were in most cases ugly and wrong. This was the South, ugly and wrong. The North was country to see, natural country that man had not yet ruined. So he worked north, not in a hurry, in his world, listening to loons and coyotes and frogs and birds and seeing new and beautiful things, sunlight reflecting on the water, blazing red sunlights, black star-studded skies each day and night. Sliding, he thought, the canoe was sliding north, and maybe he'd stop and see his friends and meet Kagwadash, and they could have a laugh talking about how his thoughts had ran. Beauty marks from scars. Ha! She would laugh. Okay, so that was chapter 1 of Brian's Hunt. This is a really good book. It's up there with The River. You know how I am about the river, so this is going to be a good one. And y'all, I may have to just mail you out your study guide. I don't know, but anyways, we're going to read it together. So y'all listen one more time today. This is my last video. I'm tired. I've been videotaping since 8 o'clock this morning, except for eating lunch. And I've done this like 7, 8 times now. But y'all, we're going to get this. We're going to figure it out. Okay. Hang in there with me. I love you to pieces. Please try your best. And if you have any questions, email me. I haven't heard from anybody, so I'm guessing that you can see my videos and everything's going okay. Let me know, okay? I love you to pieces. I will see you tomorrow.